What will the future role of public space be? What are the new policies that public space needs?
The first thing I would like to mention relates to where we stand on this pandemic and its effects on cities. Because I have the feeling that the concept of normality, a new normality that has started to be used massively, presuppose that the pre-existing social and spatial relations in cities were optimal for the quality of life of people, and I don't think so. I believe that cities have been in crisis for a long time. The urban inequality has grown to unsustainable limits, and that cities are not being able to respond to people's basic needs. The city has been very beneficial for the accumulation of money and power, but that money and power has not been distributed homogeneously among the inhabitants, and yet it is themselves who sustain the city, the inhabitants themselves. So I hope there is not a new normality that emulates the way the way city used to work. I hope that there is a new foundation of cities with equity and sustainability as their new horizon. I think it should be strengthened as a democratic space for socialization, access, and exchange among citizens. It is the private spaces that produce the greatest risk of contagions, not the public space. I will hope that as a consequence of this pandemic, there will be a promotion and creation of more public spaces, which will allow more families to have access to open and recreational spaces that will take them out of the overcrowding of houses or neighborhoods, especially for the less favored in society. We know here in Latin America or in poor countries, we have huge problem with overcrowding, people, a lot of families living in only one house, and so on. Similarly, an articulated network of public spaces in cities would encourage active mobility, reducing the use of motorized vehicles that increase the risk of contagions. Finally, these public spaces should help to mitigate the climate crisis, which has been and will be much more devastating than the current health crisis. Therefore, we need to understand and plan public spaces from a health perspective, not in the sense of restricting their use, but in the sense of promoting it. We need to take life in cities out of private buildings and turn it towards the public, optimize resources, and democratize their land accessibility. So I see public space as a tool to return to cities, but as I mentioned, not as the normality that we used to have. I think we need to change that normality. We need to trigger new ways of living, and I think public spaces has a key role in triggering this new lifestyle, this new health-oriented cities.
Do you think the idea of more dense cities that was a good idea for facing the environmental challenges that we're facing?
I still believe that compact cities are so much better solution than large cities or suburbs cities, suburb kind of model cities. Mainly because I still believe, I know this pandemic has been very dramatic. I know it has affected us massively, but I still believe we are facing another kind of crisis that is so much more dangerous than this health crisis, and for me, it's the climate crisis. And this is a health crisis. I don't want to minorize it, but this is a health crisis that it will pass. It has been difficult, it will cost lives. I'm conscious of that, but it will pass, But there is a climate crisis that if we don't take proper actions, it will not pass. It will be the last crisis. And this is something that we need to integrate in planning of cities. Large cities or suburbs-based cities are much more dangerous, or it contributes much more to the climate crisis, in the sense that they produce a lot of more emissions. You know, if you live in a suburb, you need to travel a lot to the core of the cities, and this produces a lot of emissions. And also the building or the construction type produce more emissions and so on. And I really believe that compact cities are a better solution.
How does it work in Latin American cities?
Thinking specifically in the case of Santiago, the public space has always been designed or planned for specific spaces. We have big parks in specific parts of the city, so a lot of people go to that park or that green area to spend some time there. And of course, when these kind of spaces are not distributed properly among the city, you know, a lot of people go there, and this massive use of that space makes it dangerous in some way in this context. But if we change that perspective and we start investing not only or not mainly in these specific large spaces, but more on the sidewalks, more, you know, making every street more livable, I think people would enjoy even, you know, a little walk around the corner would be enough to, you know, to get rid of the stress of this pandemic, of this confinement. And so, yeah, I think a network or minor spaces, green spaces around the city, rather than large spaces, would be a more strategic way to face this pandemic. There are different things related to that. One point is that compact cities are usually more walkable city, or the distance to services are shorter. So there, every neighborhood have access to basic services in a walkable distance or in a short distance. So you don't have to cross the whole city to reach, you know, your work, your service, and this is very helpful in this situation. While in capital cities, there, especially people living in the suburbs, you need to cross the whole city. You don't have access to a proper public transport service, so the risk of contagious is much more higher. On the other hand, it seems to me that politicians or government are pretty concerned about keep the economic running, and in that sense they have been more shy, let's say, to establish restrictions on larger cities. In larger cities, you know, the government needs larger cities to keep producing money, and I think they have not been strong enough to prepare or to propose solutions to keep, you know, to stop or to reduce the activity, the economical activity in a sustainable way. I'm not saying just putting a stop. Of course, this is not the role of the state. You know, the state needs to keep working, but yeah, I think they have been shy. Here in Chile, we have the situations, and it's a completely. There are two points of view about it. Some people, because people are not staying in home, even though there is a call to stay at home, people are going out anyway. And there are some people that say that is because people don't obey, you know, that it's a willing thing. I mean, they decide to go out. And I don't believe that way. I'm more on the other point of view, that is because people have the need to go out. Why? Because the situation, especially in developing countries, are not so well. For example, job opportunities, jobs are not regulated. People live in a everyday payment basis. So of course there are some families that have a proper job, with contract that you can agree with your employer to have a telework, to work at home. But there are many families that lives on an everyday basis that they need to. I don't know. I'm thinking on people working in the markets, you know, in the street markets, or even I don't know, people who lives in the streets and they collect things. I mean, these people still needs the street, and cities are not being able to give a proper response. That people that I think, at least in Chile, well, it is more people that we imagine living in this situation. I mean, at least the authorities have recognized that they don't expect so much people in this kind of situation.
What will be the future role of our streets? What will be the new forms of human transportation?
I have been working on this topic in a while, and it's very difficult to promote in this pandemic context the active mobility, walking, public transport, biking. But I still believe that is the future of cities. I understand that it's difficult to promote it, the use of public transport in the current context, and that it may seem a little counterproductive. But let's be honest, I mean, the car is a private form of transport, and it's a privilege for a minority, even though the rate of motorization is growing every year in cities. It's still a privilege. I see it, the use of the car, as a privilege. In addition, there is no sense in proposing short-term car-based solutions. If it is a long-term, this will cause environmental and health deterioration at a global level. The car can be, motorized solutions could be helpful in this moment, a specific moment, but in a long term, it will cause a lot of disaster in a global level. And moreover, the city needs the virtues of public transport, which are closely related to the very act of moving around. You know, generate unexpected encounters, routines that are voluntarily changed, the cities observed from another perspective, new exchanges between inhabitants emerge during public transport or during active mobility, among other kinds of impacts. So yeah, I think public transport and active mobility are intimately related to the identity of cities, and its inhabitants feel identified through the mobility. In this sense, there are many measures that can be taken to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. For example, change contracts with operators and base them on kilometers traveled instead of per passenger, or define distance and maximum capacity of buses. I mean, inside the buses, maybe limit the capacity of each bus, or facilitates different forms of payments without contact, like payment with cards that maybe in developing countries are massive use, but in developing countries are not so common yet. So you still have contact with the driver and so on, and maybe you start paying with cards and so on. And of course, facilitate hygiene measures like having soap in the bus, and this kind of measures that will help to mitigate the contagion. But I don't believe that you need to ban the use of public transport. I think it's very important to promote it, not to promote the use of the car. And of course, this is related to public transport, but of course, I really hope that from now on, we will see wider sidewalks, less space for the car. I think we need wider sidewalks. We need more space for walking in cities. You know, we need walking streets, exclusive walking streets. I mean, yeah. And regarding this delivery that you mentioned in the questions, I hope. I mean, I like that. At least here in Chile, they use a lot the bikes, and you see a lot of movements in the bikes. But in Chile, is a system that is completely regulated. I mean, for me, and maybe here I'm not talking so much about the city itself. But for me, it's a problem that they don't have contracts. It's not regulated work. So of course, if something happens to these people, the company that are behind these delivery companies will not take care of them. And I think this is an issue that it repeats in many cities. So if we want to trigger this kind of delivery options by bike, calling, or by an app that you call and you receive your things at home, okay, it's okay for me. But I think we need to do it well. And by this, I mean we need to protect the one who will take things to your home. And I think that discussions, at least Chile, we are not having it. Of course, there are the cycle paths. We need to have a complex system of bicycle paths in all cities, which triggers their massive use. I mean, it's not. Again, I'm focusing on Latin American cities. That it's very common that we have, I don't know, one bike lane, or you build a new road, and okay, you have a bike lane in that road, but there are not bike lanes plans. There is no global, a vision of biking in a city level. A proper plan for biking in each city. So I think we need to move to properly plan biking, and especially mixing the different uses, different modes, how walking, biking, and the use of public transport will relate each other, and how you will pass from one to another mode easily. And I think this is very helpful. This multimodality is very helpful to leave the car at home, because of course, I mean, it's not enough to say, no, you must leave the car at home, and people will not leave it. You need to make it easier for people. And in this sense, the time you saved using multimodality is a very crucial issue. And on another hand, every day it appears new evidence that shows that COVID-19 spread easily in polluted environments. So in this sense, we need to build health-oriented cities. Houses with proper ventilations, parks, and green areas for everyone, walkable distances to basic services in every neighborhood. I'm thinking in this case in the Paris model about the 15-minute city. And yeah, I think we need a refoundation of cities, as I said before, with life as the main outcome of cities, and not the economic profit as a main outcome.
What should be the role of technology and AI in rethinking the possibilities for public space? Can AI be used to control parts of the city according to unexpected events?
Well, I think it's very interesting to see the advantages of technology and how this affects our daily lives. However, I believe that many times we become obsessed with technology and we neglect certain basic criteria, so that this technology really does mean a benefit for everyone. I mean, sometimes it's too much about the technology and too less about the people. So in relation to apps, data, smart city, etc., I like the conceptualization that the Catalan sociologist and urbanist Jordi Borja makes when he says that we don't need smart cities, but smart citizens. By that, he means that data and the use of technology must be available to the inhabitants democratically and transparently. They must be involved in urban decisions and not just be used for the data they represent. The technology must be used for the benefit of the city and the people from the people themselves. I mean, people must be in the core of decisions and in the core of planning, not from a small group that controls and sells the data, enriching themselves at the cost of the privacy and daily life of the inhabitants. Having said this, it seems to me that technology can play an important role in the development of cities. One example is mobility as a service. I don't know if you have heard about this concept, MaaS, which helps to optimize travel in the city, collecting data in real time and planning the best routes according to the state of traffic. It is related again with the previous questions, I think, and of course it helps a lot, to create a culture of multimodality in cities. And on another hand, I believe in the value of the spontaneous of the city as an engine that triggers unique social processes. And in that sense, I'm not very attracted to technological apps and services that reduce the city to a basic expression of living. Of course, they often help, they are very useful, but I think but for me, they are a complement to the opportunities of the city, not a replacement of what the city offers. Just for example, for me, there is no better technology as my feet, my nose, my hands. And, I enjoy being outside and being in the city, smelling, interacting. I think the city is not only about, it offers a lot more than products. It offers relations, it offers unexpected changes, it offers creativity, or it triggers creativity, and yeah, I think technology is playing a huge role in the development and in the production of cities, but it is complementary to the role that people play themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo. Just to tie up a little bit this last question with the previous one about mobility, I was wondering which new challenge you encounter as you are working with two different organizations. One is the German Cooperation, which is an European institution, and then you are working for Ciudad Común, which is an NGO. So I think they have different logics. So how these two different modalities accommodates to the new, not normality, but say new reality, and which are the challenges you are facing on the daily routine of your work?
Well, as you mentioned, there are two completely different levels. From in one hand, the German cooperation or international cooperation, let's not put just the case of the German cooperation, but international cooperation is pushing for a normality mainly based in a state point of view, in a country level, and it cannot research in the very commons of daily life. It's more about general political decision on promoting sustainable mobility in a country level, or through political or through policies, national policies, or even maybe local policies, but they are not talking about what every family is facing in this pandemic. It's a completely different level. And of course, it is related because international organizations relate a lot to ONU, the UN, and this kind of let's call it statu quo institutions. These institutions, of course, are very helpful. I'm not saying the opposite, but in some way they are not. I don't think these kind of institutions are questioning, are pushing for a new foundation of cities, for this more critic perspective. I think they are trying to keep things moving, which is important, but they are not entering in this kind of level. And on the other hand, NGOs and families, everyday people are really affected by the pandemic in another kind of levels. I mean, not in the sense of public policies on country economics. Of course, these kind of things affect them too, but it's more related to how they see their parent, their family, their relates, how they keep, feeding their kids, or how they educate the kids while being at home, or how to work and teach and educate your kids in a very reduced space. There's a lot of families that, I mean, of course, there are privileged families that have one space for working, one space for the kids, and one space for the TV and so on. But many families are just put together in one really reduced space, and yeah, they are struggling with this pandemic in a very hard way. And this kind of level is what I think civil society organizations and activities would help to give visibility to this kind of situations, and to search for help. And I think also NGOs have played a very important role in articulating people-to-people help. I don't know if I'm using the correct word, but we call it in Spanish, el pueblo ayuda al pueblo. Is about a kind of helping each other, but without the influence of the state, of massive organizations, in a more organic and emerging way. And I think this kind of help is very important, because as mentioned, it suits for this kind of everyday problem that families are facing during this pandemic. I think both levels are necessary, but they both works in very different levels.
Can technology be used with citizens to help encourage this? Like, do you think technology can be used to attract people, or for subsidies, or to provide advice, or where is the line? Where does it go too far?
Yeah, I think so. I think technology could be helpful in that sense. For example, advising when, I don't know, a space is much crowded, or yeah, this kind of situations. But for me, it's also necessary. I'm very concerned about who owns that data, and it's related with what was mentioned before. Of course, this would be very helpful. I think is necessary. It could be a good solution, but that data is provided by citizens, so I think it must be owned by citizens. And yeah, I know that it does not work in that sense today, and a lot of companies are profiting on this data that you generate while working with this device. And on another hand, yeah, I mean, again, talking about this inequality that is getting really, really high in Latin America. A lot of people have one of these, but a lot of people does not. So, to whom that kind of policies, are being a benefit is a really necessary question, because sometimes we rely, but we generate this app that is being very helpful, but not all the people have access to that app. Not all the people have access to the phone to have that app, or have the culture to consult that app, etc. So I think we need like a integrated approach that not only an app or a technology could be helpful, but in a wider plan. This is what I mean. I mean, it is part of a plan, but it could not be the plan. You cannot base your decisions on technology. You must integrate decisions, but in a wider vision about what you will do, how you will want to help, or how you will mitigate the impact of the pandemic, etc.